our focus today, we're going to look at percents and fractions. In particular, we're going to focus on writing a fraction as a percent, writing a percent as a fraction, and also calculating the percent of a number. And so launching right into it. Write these percents as fractions in their simplest form. Well, you likely remember that percent means per 100. And so to write a percent as a fraction, it's nothing more than taking it and putting it over a denominator of 100. There's your fraction. Now we need simplest form. So what number will divide into both 28 and 100?
4.
Okay. 4 works, 2 works.
25.
I'm choosing to use the larger one. 28 divided by 4 gives you 7.
Over 25.
100 divided by 4 gives you 25. Anything else divided into both 7 and 25? Nope. So we're done. 7 over 25. Looking at 35%.
35 over 100.
Right? 35 over 100.
Divided by 5.
Yep, Charlie correctly identified that we've got a common factor of 5. So dividing both by 5,
20.
7 over 20. We're done. All right, so that's converting a percent into a fraction in its simplified form. What about taking a percent and writing it, or I'm sorry, other way, taking a fraction and writing it as a percent? Well, of course, there are different ways of doing it. And Brenda, what you were just mentioning about dividing it out, that's a method based on decimals. It's valid, you can do them that way. I'm going to focus on the proportion method, using a fraction method. In particular, when we were looking at these percents, 28% was 28 over 100. Well, we can focus on saying this is some percent out of 100. And thus, all we have to do is solve this proportion. Well, we could cross multiply, completely valid. If we wanted to cross multiply, we can do that. I'm going to choose not to here because I'm going to look at it and say, how do you turn 20 into 100? You can multiply by 5. And so instead of using the cross multiplying method, I'm using the equivalent ratios method. 11 times 5? 65%. Done. 20 over 25. And yes, if we wanted to, we could use times 4 to calculate the using the equivalent ratios method. But of course, if we want to, we can still use cross multiply. That's another valid technique. We could take 25 times p. 20 times 100 would equal 2,000. And when we divide it out by 25, we get our answer of 80%.
You do that in your head, or do you have that?
And I would like to just note that it does not matter which method you choose to use. You can use equivalent ratios, you can use cross multiplying. Both of them are valid techniques. That's why we spent all of Unit 6 working on proportions and solving ratios and things like that. You can choose your technique, but I do expect to see you using one of these proportion techniques, because right now we are in a section where we're focusing on the connection between fractions and percents. We will have work later on in our unit where we focus on the connections between we will have a lesson focusing on the connection between percents and decimals. I do not want you using the decimal method here because we are going to practice that method later. This section is about this technique. That's why I expect to see it one of these two ways. Okay, consider a word problem then. Radio station randomly selects 1 out of 5 finalists, and of course, you guys are already emphasizing right there, 1 out of 5. You are one of the 5 finalists. What is the probability that you win? Well, in our last unit, we would have simply said it's the probability 1 out of 5. And we were stopping there, we were done with the ratio. However, yeah, write your answer as a percent.
20 over 100.
So now we're looking at this and saying, what percent is that out of 100? Solving it any way you want. Well, I like the equivalent ratio simply because it's so simple. That gives us 20. Thus, it's 20%. We're done. The probability that you win is 20%, and done. Okay, next. All right, this one is used to address percent of a number. A desert tortoise can actually go over a year without drinking any water at all. And when they do drink, because they need to drink a lot to basically hoard it for a while, their body weight can increase by up to 40%. So let's say that you've got a desert tortoise and it weighs 15 pounds, and then it goes on its bender and starts drinking. How many pounds can its body weight increase? Okay, 40% of course is how much it can increase. We're not looking for a percent of increase, we're looking for a number of increase. This is looking at it and saying we need to have 40% of those 15 pounds. What number is 40% of 15 pounds? Well, of course, we would be able to set up a proportion based on this. 40% is the fraction 2 over 5 when we simplify it down. And that is going to be equal to some amount of weight out of the 15 pounds. One way to solve this type of a problem is to set up a proportion, percent being equal to the amount. And then we solve this however we want. If we chose to use the cross multiplication method, we'd have 5w. 2 times 15 gives us 30. And dividing out by 5, of course, leads us to w being 6. So they could gain 6 pounds of water. Okay, the question is asked, where did I get the 2/5? Quickly thinking, 40% is 40 out of 100. And when we simplify that fraction, we could divide out by 20, simplifying it down to 2/5. And so there we go. Of course, we know, and we will see when we work with our decimal method, this is not the only way that we could have done this problem. There are many, many different correct ways. This is one method that's based on using the proportion skills that we just spent weeks working on. If you're familiar with this type of a problem, you may keep in mind that 40% would be our 2 out of 5. Of means multiplication, and so we could have simply been saying 2 over 5 multiplied by 15. We could have done it that way. We'll see down the road how we could do this with decimals. There are lots of correct ways to do the problem. I'm focusing on proportions because that's the skill that we're practicing. It's our priority standard that we need to be good at.